Hi everyone! This week for Story Kit Crush, I'm sharing a spread that I made with Ali Edwards' Friends Story Kit, and this spread is going to be documenting my past relationships with my ex-boyfriends and the types of things that I learned from each of those relationships. So while I don't like to document my ex-boyfriends because they're kind of like in the past, I do recognize that they kind of taught me valuable lessons, at least about what types of relationships I value and what types of traits I value in a partner. So I think this is really important to document. But at the same time, I didn't want to document a whole spread for each of them. So I thought this would be a nice way to kind of summarize all of my past relationships just briefly without having to spend too much time on each of them. So this kit came with a stack of these blue heart shapes, and they all say good friendships feed the soul all around the edges of them, but the print is kind of small in comparison to the whole hearts shape, so I thought it would be okay to include these on a spread about my ex-boyfriends, even though it's not specifically about friendship. So I'm just laying out a few of these hearts just to see approximately how much space it'll take up on the spread. I know I wanted at least 4 of them for each of my 4 X's. And then I'm going to stamp the title before I do anything with the heart shapes. So my title for this spread is going to be X's and O's. And if that sounds familiar to you at all, that's because that's a song by Elle King. And in this song, she kind of talks about her casual relationships and them being exes who all want to chase her, and she doesn't want any of them. And I'm by no means that casual with my relationships, but I thought that type of snarky title would be kind of fitting for some of the lessons that I learned, because for some of the exes, the journaling that I wrote in these was kind of sarcastic, so I thought that would be a perfect title for this spread. And I'm using the Ali Edwards Storytelling Basics Ali Alpha in conjunction with the Distress Oxide Chip Sapphire. I just thought this font was kind of playful and would go with this type of spread really well. I did have to pull out a separate alphabet stamp from Kelly Purkey. That's the Addison set. I just had it on my desk because this Ali Edwards set doesn't have an apostrophe, and the Kelly Purkey set did. So I did just pull the apostrophe from that set. Once I'm done my title, I'm just moving down to the bottom corner of my right page, and my plan is to stamp the phrase, "That's how the story goes," which is one of the lyrics from Elle King's song. I'm stamping this in a bit of a lighter color, so this is the Speckled Egg Distress Oxide, and this shade of blue kind of matches the blue in those heart-shaped pieces of paper. And my original plan was to do "the story goes" on the very bottom, and then the words "that's how" on top of that, just aligned onto the right side. So whenever I want to align something on the right side of the page, I always stamp going backwards so that I can make sure that all the letters fit. But as you'll see, sometimes it's really hard to spell things backwards. So usually I do have the phrase written out in front of me so that I can go letter by letter backwards. And in this case, I kind of got careless and made a little boo-boo on the second line that I was stamping. So instead of stamping "that's how," I stamped the W-O-H, and then I forgot the S in the "that's," and then stamped the T next to that instead. So here I'm just kind of panicking a bit and trying to decide how I'm going to fix this mistake. So originally I'm thinking maybe I can stamp the S after the T, but there's not really enough room. And then I was thinking, oh, maybe I can cover this up with one of those hearts, but there's not enough room for that either. And I didn't really want to re-stamp all of that out again, so I just decided to stamp the beginning of that phrase on the left page instead, and then that just kind of makes it look like it was always meant to go across the 2 pages, starting from the left page and going across to the right page. And to get rid of that part that I had stamped the mistake, I'm just going to trim off the bottom section of that page that says "the story goes" and save that to adhere onto a separate blank page. And you can tell that there are 2 layers of cardstock in that part, which is kind of inconsistent with the rest of the page, but I kind of fix that later on and make it look like it was more intentional. Now that I'm done with my stamping, I'm just rearranging my hearts so that they fit nicely across this page. And I decided to cut one of them in half and have one overhanging each of those ends to kind of make the flow a bit more organic throughout that middle section. And for 4 of these hearts, I'm actually just going to use the back of them instead so that I can have my journaling written on them and it looks a bit more clear. But instead of just a white piece of paper, I'm going to do some ink blending with the Speckled Egg Distress Oxide so that it gives a bit more color and it kind of pops up the white page a bit. Once that was finished, I just added some journaling into each of those 4 hearts, just by hand with a black pen. I usually like to do my journaling on a typewriter or print it out on a computer, but I felt like handwriting these would be a bit nicer just for this particular spread because of the other messy things that were going on. And now I'm just creating some hinges so that I can attach each of those 4 photos onto the front of these journaling hearts so that they can flip open to reveal the journaling underneath. I'm using vellum to make the hinges so that they're a bit less noticeable when the flaps are closed. And I'm making this about 1¼ inches wide. That's just the width of the gummed area on the heart notepad. So for my photos, I specifically didn't choose any photos of people because I didn't want the focus to be on the ex-boyfriends that I had, but rather all of the lessons that I learned from being in relationships with them. So that's why I chose to focus just on things that kind of reminded me of them. So like the skis and a heart necklace and some stationary things and pebbles. Just subtle things that would remind me of those relationships without actually having to see their faces. Not that I wouldn't want to see their faces ever again. It's just that's not what I wanted to focus on for this spread. So I'm just using my Tombow Mono permanent adhesive tape runner to put some adhesive over the entire vellum hinge that I created for each of these hearts. And I'm going to stick half of that vellum hinge behind the journaling heart, kind of lining it up with the bottom edge of the right side of that heart there. And then I'm going to attach the back of that vellum hinge to the back of one of these photos that corresponds to my journaling. And to do that, I'm just putting some adhesive onto the back of my heart photo and then just putting it behind the vellum hinge so that the 2 hearts are kind of touching each other on the one edge. And then I'm just sandwiching that hinge by adhering one of those blue hearts onto the back of that photo. I did take my bone folder just to reinforce that crease so that it lies flat when all of the hearts are closed. So now I'm going to repeat that 3 more times for my other 3 hearts. And in the end, I have 4 hearts that have a photo on the front. And when you open it, there is the blue heart on the left side and my journaling heart on the right side. After I finished doing that, I just used some puffy alphabet stickers to spell out the initials of each of my ex-boyfriends onto the corner of each of these hearts. And these are just the Ali Edwards Storytelling Basics black puffy alphabet stickers. And because the alphabets are black and the backgrounds of most of these photos are a bit darker, it doesn't really stand out as much, but I like the fact that it's a bit more subtle. After that, I'm just doing a final rearrangement of my hearts to make sure they look nice on across both pages. And because I had rearranged my title so that it's spanning across the 2 pages instead of just being on the right page, I ended up with a lot more room on the right page. So I decided to cut one of those hearts in half and put half of the heart on top of the phrase "the story goes," and the bottom half of the heart just coming in from the top of that page. And it worked really well because it does look like it's going behind the extra layer of cardstock that I have for the stamped phrase "the story goes" from when I cut away my mistake at the beginning of the video. Just adhering down all of the hearts into place, and that finishes up my layout. I hope you were inspired by my process video to kind of think outside of the box when you're using your kits. So this kit was about friendship, but I clearly used it for something that was kind of like a friendship, but not really. And I hope this gives you some inspiration to document some of the more difficult relationships that you have in your life too. So whether they're past relationships or past friendships that have just moved on. Thanks as always to Crystal Idignate for hosting these Story Kit Crush challenges on Instagram. I always enjoy seeing everyone else's projects as well. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more process videos. I'm going to try to do a Story Kit Crush process video every Friday if I can. Maybe I'll miss a couple here and there, but make sure you stay tuned, and thanks so much for watching.